Well, hello everyone and welcome. Thank you so much for joining our breakout session today. My name is Marc Nehring and I am a Senior Manager for Growth Solutions. And I am very, very excited to have the opportunity to be able to moderate this discussion today. Thank you. I want to first thank Chicagoland Food and Beverage Network for inviting us to join in the events today. We are very grateful to have these virtual experiences. I know Alan said that we are anxious, hopefully sooner than later we can be back in person and having these social events in person. But until then, I know that everyone in our industry is extremely busy with this pandemic. So we do appreciate your time for logging in and taking this time with us. So today we have an amazing panel. We're going to have 4 panelists. It looks like Tim's going to be logging in here shortly. He's having some technical difficulties. But our topic is going to be food and beverage trends that we expect to see going into 2021 and how brands, retailers can take advantage of those trends and really provide the best products and position those products for the consumer and deliver on those needs. So we do only have about 30 minutes. This is going to be a very quick session. We have 4 panelists and 30 minutes, and I do want to leave some time at the end. Over on the right side, there is a chat box. So as we go through the discussion today, if you come up with a question, I'll remind you at the end and you can go ahead and put that in and we'll try and get a few of those answered. So as I said, we have an amazing panel, unbelievable panel. I don't say that because we are all KeHE distributor employees. I say that because truly each of these 4 panels has years and years of experience in CPG as well as the natural and specialty industry. And so I'm excited to engage in this discussion today and get their thoughts on what they see as trends that we can expect to see going into 2021. So with that, we're going to dive right in. I'm going to just take a brief minute. Maybe you can wave to the camera as I introduce the 4 panelists. So first we have Heather Drenzyk. Heather is currently a Senior Manager for Growth Solutions at KeHE Distributors. In her current role, she develops retail category management solutions based on analytics, consumer insights, and category trends. She has been in the CPG industry for over 20 years now and works with several of our large retailers at KeHE. Next is Tabitha Sewell. Tabitha is currently a category manager at KeHE, and she oversees our dairy, non-dairy, and refrigerated beverage categories. She also has a 20-year career in food and beverage with now over 13 years at KeHE. And as I promised, lots and lots of experience with this panelist discussion. Next is Tim is also a category manager at KeHE, and he oversees our pet food and supplies, household cleaners, and general merchandise categories. He has over 13 years of experience holding previous roles at Nestle Purina and now at KeHE, giving him extensive knowledge of the pet industry, which I'm excited as we're going to get into that discussion a little bit today with him today. And then finally, Alvaro Reyes. Alvaro is also a category manager at KeHE, and he manages several product portfolios, including bagged coffee, cocoa, and tea, in addition to several others. He has over 10 years of CPG experience across multiple functions, including corporate strategy and financial analysis. So I am absolutely thrilled to get this discussion going today. And I just want to jump right in. As I said, our time is limited. So Heather, I want to start with you and just kind of dive right in. So believe it or not, we're in December of 2020, and I think everyone's looking forward to the holidays, but perhaps this year we're looking even past the holidays, hoping to get into that next year of 2021. And Heather, specifically with your role working on the retail side, you're digging into the trends and understanding exactly what's going on through COVID from the very beginning. So I want to kind of start there. And let's talk about, Heather, what have you specifically seen as far as shopping habits and how those have changed through COVID?
Yeah, thanks, Marc. And I think to better understand the changes in shopping habits, we need to look back on how we arrived at this current state. So, prior to COVID-19 being declared a pandemic, we saw consumers being really proactive about their health and wellness. And then on March 13th, a national emergency was declared in the US, and with that declaration came panic buying. So consumers switched from proactive wellness into pantry loading and preparation. So when we look what was occurring within food and beverage categories, alcohol, frozen and refrigerated meat, seafood, produce, bread and baked goods, frozen entrees, those were all up double digits versus a year ago. Stores, they were seeing numerous out of stocks and empty shelves during this period, unfortunately. So we saw consumers who don't typically purchase natural and specialty items making a switch to those items because their regular conventional or private label brand was out of stock. And so with this trial, it's led to growth not only within conventional, but also natural and specialty positioned items. So from there, we moved into the quarantine phase. And while buying remained elevated versus a year ago, we were still seeing the huge stock up trips like we were during the initial pantry stocking phase. But this time, consumers, they were purchasing more than just toilet paper and hand sanitizer. There was high demand for baking mixes, flour, shelf-stable pasta, beans, grains, rice, and soup. Consumers were making the shift to cooking and eating all of their meals at home. So that brings us to the point where the states began to reopen. So we saw that consumers were still purchasing baking ingredients and pasta, but now we were seeing larger trends towards spirits and mixers. Who can blame everybody after being quarantined from some time? Want some spirits and mixers in there, some shelf-stable chips. We also saw frozen desserts on the rise in terms of purchases. So a pandemic that's hopefully a once-in-a-lifetime event for us to experience. There's a lot of uncertainty surrounding it, and I think consumers really panicked. And this caused a huge shift in the buying habits, spending habits, and overall eating occasions. We went from having restaurants open for business to everything shut down, and consumers really had to shift to cooking all their meals at home. And then one last item I'll touch on real quickly in terms of shopping habits is the way in which consumers go about purchasing their groceries. So during the height of lockdown and quarantine, many turned to purchasing their items online. There was an increase in purchases made directly through a retailer's website, as well as through third-party grocery delivery services such as Shipt or Instacart.
Yeah, so much to dissect there in what you just said over the past 9 months through this pandemic, right? But let's focus on what you said as far as at-home cooking. I know that we would expect that to continue as we go forward into 2021. As far as, nearly 50% of dollars spent outside of grocery stores and food service prior to the pandemic, 50-50 split, and then evolving through the pandemic with nearly overnight, as you mentioned. And so all of this at-home cooking with all those categories growing, within that, do you see certain flavor profiles or cuisines that consumers are turning towards in the midst of the pandemic?
Yeah. Right now, we're really in an exciting period of culinary curiosity and creativity. So while isolated at home, consumers, they're trying new foods and they're looking to expand their comfort zone. They're experimenting with flavors and cooking techniques. Maybe they saw the latest recipe on Pinterest. I know that that's been my case anyway. And this newfound passion is leading the charge for the growth of international cuisine. So we've seen cuisine types such as Latin or African and Indian up since the previous year, while the common go-tos that you think of, like Italian and Mexican cuisines, they're really falling off the map in favor of these new cuisine types.
Yeah, that's interesting because even myself, my wife and I, we would get some food for takeout. We'd come home and then we'd go online and Google, like, how do we make this? And then head to the grocery store, and try and create that experience at home. So I'm definitely relating on that note with this trend. So as we go forward, there's a lot of retailers, manufacturers, and brands on the call today. How do you think the climate is going to evolve after we get through?
Well, I think that for some consumers, nothing will really change. Their shopping and buying patterns, they'll remain the same. But I think that for others, we'll see less trips and that consumers will be spending more per trip. So I think the overall common theme here for consumers is lessening the risk of exposure, which in this case means less trips to the grocery store. I also think that some categories will continue to experience growth for some time, namely paper goods, household cleaners, baking ingredients, and pantry staples such as canned goods. The consumers, they won't want to be caught off guard again, and therefore they will have a lot more of these types of items in their homes as a precautionary measure. And then I also think that we will continue to see growth within specialty and our natural positioned items. As I mentioned, the out of stock issues on conventional products really forced the trial of natural and specialty items. And some of this trial was brought on by consumers who don't typically purchase natural and specialty items. So I'm really hoping that the buyer conversion rates for these items, they continue to grow post-COVID.
Yeah, that's going to be really interesting to see. Tabitha, I want to get you involved in this discussion. As a category manager, you're digging into all these brands, you're seeing all these brands come across. As it relates to what Heather just said, we had these different phases where even pre-COVID, before the quarantine phase, a lot of consumers were very concerned about health and wellness and kind of, understandably trying to take care of themselves and their families. But then as we kept going, as Heather mentioned, consumers were purchasing basically everything. And we hit this quarantine phase where they were turning to spirits and turning to ice cream and sometimes more conventional foods that may not be the healthiest. So can you tell us a little bit about that balance, or is there still been this shift toward health and wellness, or is it time to let go of the COVID-15 as we've heard it? How do you feel about that?
Yeah. Thanks for having me, Mark. I would say COVID disrupted all of our habits, right? And adapting is stressful. So some people's reaction was to enjoy those comfort foods and beverages at home, but also we've seen an interest in learning about ingredients and recipes and alternative medicine and overall well-being. So one Mintel study showed the last 2 years mentions of holistic and health and wellness has increased 148%. And since the end of COVID doesn't appear to be very near to us, consumers are really searching out products that are going to be immune supportive and support gut health to reduce the effects of COVID-19.
Yeah, definitely. And how about in terms of innovation? What do you see through COVID as far as innovation is concerned?
I would say we're definitely going to see the continued requirement for consumers wanting those premium functional ingredients. They've been evolving over the last couple of years, and I really see the focus in kind of 4 key areas. So the first being mental well-being, things like adaptogens, cannabis oil, lavender, and ashwagandha, all those calming effects that consumers need right now in this stressful time. The second is wellness into the future. So plant-based innovation is exploding. Conventional retailers and manufacturers are even investing in these types of products. And the animal products, from meat and seafood to heavy whipping cream and eggs, they all have these plant-based alternatives now. And popular brands really have keyed in that taste. And it's very close to the taste and texture that you're getting from dairy products. So that's great too. And then third is immune support. I mentioned it already. It's a huge focus for consumers. So there's widespread interest in products that contain prebiotics, probiotics, also vitamin C and vitamin D and zinc. All of these ingredients are appearing to help protect us from viruses like COVID-19. And then last, physical well-being. We see collagen is on the rise. It's been seen to have many health benefits like relieving joint pain and improving skin health. It's a KeHE and SPINS trend prediction, and we're seeing triple-digit growth in that.
Oh, yeah. And it seems like these call-outs, I'm seeing them more on the packaging, right? Elderberry or different types of call-outs of immunity, so prevalent. One thing you mentioned there, I want to dig a little bit deeper in that, is plant-based. I know this has been a huge trend prior to COVID. As Heather talked about, one benefit to COVID, but smaller brands that maybe are offering a plant-based product, when those conventional brands are out of stock and the retailer is taking in those plant-based brands, the opportunity to trial that, and they're finding that not only are they getting more plants into their diet, they actually taste really good. And so what do you see as far as the evolution of plant-based, or kind of where it's going to go in 2021?
I think plant-based products have years of growth ahead of them. What I'm seeing in dairy, there are so many innovative products still hitting the market today. So moving to a more plant-centric diet, I think, is important for both our health as a consumer and the health of the environment. Plant-based diets, they're low in saturated fat and cholesterol. They're rich in vitamins and minerals and antioxidants. So that all helps reduce disease, which we're focused on currently for sure. And then, there are serious concerns about the loss of water and really running out during our lifetime. So businesses and manufacturers that are responsible are looking towards those sustainable practices like carbon neutral processes and regenerative farming.
Definitely, I think it's going to take from all the entire supply chain, right, from the brand all the way through to the distributor and manufacturer and consumer, just everyone. So talk to us a little bit more. You mentioned that manufacturers are investing in innovation. What is KeHE doing in terms of innovation?
Yeah, KeHE offers a lot of great marketing tools, extensive marketing tools that we've expanded actually through COVID, right, with this virtual world that we're in. We've also got that wide network of retailers. Then they want to be first to market with these products. We know we saw a slowdown, you know, and the ways that retailers are reviewing new products has changed, but we're all adapting to not having as much live interaction. But retailers have definitely come back and want that innovation. So they're really looking for brands that are unique, brands that fill a common need, a popular diet, and of course they have to taste great too, right? So.
Definitely. And you know what I was going to mention? So in my role, I work with Albertsons Safeway, and even we touched on this in a few of the other sessions today, where they are interested in innovation very much so. It kind of went through that phase of no categories reviews. Let's just kind of shut down and continue to keep the goods flowing. But definitely, I have seen an increased interest in recent months. They want that innovation, and we're giving it to them front and center each month with the new brands that we bring into KeHE. So Tim, I want to get you involved in this discussion. I think I may be hearing
right on time.
I'm not sure who that. That right on cue, right? So Tim, as I mentioned, you've got tremendous experience, 13 years of experience, previously at Purina. Now you're at KeHE. You have seen basically everything over the past decade with regards to the pet industry. And I know there's probably quite a few of our audience today that are pet owners. So let's talk a little bit about that. What have you seen in terms of trends through COVID with regards to
so
pet?
I mean, the biggest thing that happened early on in COVID is when people realized, when all the stay-at-home orders kind of came to pass, people realized they were going to be working from home for the foreseeable future. They were going to spend a lot more time at home. So first thing we saw that happened was there was a real increase in pet adoption. So it's been estimated that about 11 million households have actually adopted a pet during the pandemic, right? So that led to an initial spike in sales back kind of in mid-March into April as people loaded up on things like crates and, different supplies and things of that nature. The other thing that it's done is we're seeing that, and when people are kind of surveyed on how has being at home and working from home, et cetera, how has that affected your relationship with your pet, is it's really strengthened the bond between people and their pets. And so that's leading to like increased treating. Maybe they're giving more treats because they're just with the dog or the cat more often. They're bonding with them more. And just with that sort of, and so that I think is really kind of insulated the industry a little bit from like the loss of premiumization. So when we look at overall trends in pet food, usually the best thing to do to figure out, hey, what's going to be the next hot pet trend is look what's happening in human food. Pet is usually close to follow. And so as humans as we've talked about even on this panel and other sessions, as humans look more and more as to what they're putting into their own bodies, that is also transitioning over to what they're seeing into their pets. And then when you throw on top of that just the additional bonding that's happening, we're still seeing a very strong, strong category here. The other thing we're seeing within the category is more people are trying to find safer ways to buy their food. So we are seeing migration to things like e-commerce, but a lot of the brick and mortar retailers have also done a nice job of pivoting to offer things like buy online, pickup, curbside pickup, things of that nature to continue to hold on to that consumer, as maybe they try and consolidate some of their trips and maybe don't run to the pet store quite as often. So those are some of the main things that we're seeing here early on.
Yeah, it's interesting. So you mentioned pet adoption. So kid you not, my wife a couple of days ago approaches me and said, what do you think about getting a dog for our 11-year-old daughter for Christmas? And I was like, that's pretty soon. So I don't know if we're going to be part of 2020 trends for pet adoption, but see about 2021. So can you talk a little bit about the demand? We saw a huge spike. We've talked with Heather, a lot of categories, Tabitha, in terms of health and wellness categories going through the roof, and just everything in general with that overnight shutdown of food service. we're seeing that start to stabilize. How has that been
so
for
pet is reacted a little bit differently. So we saw the huge spike just like human food. But what kind of happened is after there was a bit of a drop off, to account for the pantry load, the category kind of went back to pre-COVID baselines. And the major reason for that is, if you think about it, pets haven't really changed their behavior, right? They weren't going out to eat at restaurants beforehand. They don't necessarily stress eat. They're not trying new recipes or doing anything like that, right? They're still getting the same amount of food that they got pre-COVID. They're still eating at home. And so what we really saw was that kind of the category went back to where it was. There's a slight uptick just due to the fact that, again, more treats, or there's more, now, like I said, there's 11 million more households that have a pet than did before. So there's some growth, but really without that major behavioral change that humans saw, pretty intuitive that it would go back to the baseline.
That's really interesting. So I want to ask you one last question. I've had some questions regarding U.S. potentially facing a depressed market in the coming year. We're seeing COVID continue to increase. There's a lot of uncertainty still. What do you see as far as pet and how that could potentially react to a depressed market?
Yeah, I mean, the nice thing about this category is it is traditionally, we like to call it resistant, right? Nothing's resistant is proof, but if we look at what happened back in 2018 during the Great Recession, right? Pet still continued to show kind of slow, moderate growth. And again, a lot of that just has to do with the strong bond that people have with their pets now. Pets truly are part of the family, right? It's not the dog living out in the doghouse in the backyard. They are part of the family. And so people really are slow to make changes to the pet food that they're giving their pet, especially if it's working well for them. So I think the outlook for the category overall is I think we'll continue to see kind of the slow but steady growth that we've seen. A lot of that will be driven by the continued premiumization, again, as people continue to look for healthier foods for their pets. And then we also think that we'll see treating continue to increase, especially as the bond between humans and pets continues to grow as we're all together, day in and day out.
Yeah, it's just a fascinating category, and I think a really positive outlook all in all for pet as we go forward.
Yeah.
Thank you. As I said, just tremendous insight from all of you with all of your years of experience. Alvaro, we've got to get you included into this discussion. You have a lot to offer. And, we've talked with Heather about trends, at-home cooking. We've talked with Tabitha about, health and wellness and functional types of foods. Tim with the premiumization of pet. But, I want to get you involved because the question I have for you is, I see this in my day-to-day job that consumers continue to trade up. They want more natural and healthful type of products for themselves. But we're starting to see consumers question more than that, right? To them, it's more than just adding functional ingredients to their food and beverages. They're starting to ask about sustainability. Are these products sustainable? They want to understand, are they fair trade? How are these products aligning with my values? And I think this past year, with things that we've seen in the United States as far as the social environment, consumers they want to be more socially aware of the brands that they're purchasing. How do you see this as affecting our industry as we go forward?
Thank you, Mark. I agree 100% with the statement when it comes that consumers are becoming more socially aware. I believe we've all opened our eyes even further with the resurgence of the Black Lives Matter movement and all the different other social movements that have been happening this year. And I would agree that there has been an increase in the bigger question to be rising in terms of how can we make this world more equitable and more fair. And the way that the population has responded to that question is, of course, had multiple implications in our industry. Definitely, this was mentioned before in the opening discussion with Rochelle and the other people that were talking at the beginning. And there's definitely some examples that come to mind. We saw a well-recognized brand like Aunt Jemima being discontinued. Walmart is investing a couple million in creating a center for racial equity. Target is investing some additional money on local communities to increase racial equity. Hy-Vee doing their part. Range Me has done an amazing job and identifying the brands that are in the portal so they can pinpoint in which realm or which diversity area those companies fall in. So retailers and other distributors can find easier where they fit within the diversity areas. Meyer hosted an event a month ago when they were meeting different companies that were either minority owned, LGBT plus owned, women, veteran owned, or disabled included certified companies. And the goal was to see if they can add those companies to the shelves and put them into their assortment. And with this last example, I would like to mention that I believe that the consumers, as it was mentioned before, they're going to be looking for these brands on the shelves. And I believe this is what we're going to be looking at in the next couple of months and the next couple of years, getting more diversity brands on the shelf.
Yeah, definitely. If I heard you correctly, you're talking about tens of millions of dollars from some of these retailers, and upwards of even hundreds of millions invested to showcase and to help minority-owned brands, which I think is amazing. Can you talk a little bit about KeHE and what KeHE is doing to also support minority-owned brands?
In KeHE, we launched, this was a little bit over a year ago, we launched a program called Diverse Trade Program. And what we're trying to do here, or what we're doing, is we're onboarding brands that are either women-owned, minority-owned, LGBT plus owned, veteran-owned, or disabled inclusion certified companies. And here, what we're trying to aim at is to help them navigate. These are small brands that have some struggles within the industry, and we're trying to help them navigate the distribution model. In a very nutshell, what we're trying to do is to shed light to these brands so they can get into additional shelves, to get into additional stores, and we want to become mentors for them. We're also working on different initiatives on a day-to-day basis. For example, in October, we hosted a trend finder event that was focused for diverse trade suppliers or diversity suppliers. And we met with over 100 different companies that were in the diversity spectrum. And we discussed potential opportunities to start doing business together throughout our category management team. And the results were pretty impressive. We're actually onboarding a little bit over 15 of those brands that we met, which is an accomplishment. And definitely there's other initiatives that we're trying to do here. We just created a planogram of only diverse trade suppliers, and we're trying to get the word out just to get them on the shelf.
Yeah, I appreciate that. You know, as I mentioned with Albertsons Safeway, I'm currently working on some projects regarding this very issue. Heather, I'm sure Publix, other retailers also investing in this area, which I think is tremendous. Alvaro, I want to get to one last question for you, and then we're going to get some questions from our audience. So what are the biggest challenges that these minority-owned businesses are currently facing, and what opportunities can we use to really engage with that ultimate goal of making it a more equitable country?
Marc, I think that for these companies that are in the D&I spectrum, I think their biggest challenge, first of all, is to get on the shelf, and second of all, is to be visibly enough so that consumers can say, well, this is a brand that fits some part of the diversity spectrum. Now, how do we get there from putting them on the shelf to get that visibility? That is the big question. And that brings me to certifications. I believe that certifications will be playing an important role for this trend, because this is the way that it's easier to identify to both retailers, to distributors, to identify in which diversity and the diversity trend they fit in. So that way we can make it easier for them to put them on the shelf. And finally, there's also going to be that important question of how do we get consumers to understand that these certifications fit this diversity. So that comes with packaging communication and consumer education throughout this certification. So I believe that's going to be the biggest opportunity, so we can actually put them on the shelf and have them easier to be visible for the shoppers.
Awesome. Thank you, Alvaro. Thank you for your insight and everyone today. As I'm looking at the time here, we're, as I said, it was going to be a very quick session. I wish we could have just so much more time to explore this at a deeper level. If there are any questions from the audience, if you go ahead and go to the right side of the screen and you can insert those questions. As those are coming through, Tabitha, I want to grab you back, and I have a question here that I want to ask you. You know, as I mentioned, there's lots of different people on the call coming, whether from manufacturer or brands. I want to focus a little bit more on the brands that may be on the call. You know, maybe it's a young brand that is looking to 2021 to launch a new product. You know, maybe they're in the R&D phase, getting ready for that launch. Can you talk a little bit about what they should be keeping in mind as far as a strategy to go to market?
Sure, Mark. Yeah, I think they've got to be thinking about e-commerce, right? If it makes sense for their brand, e-commerce has grown so much, even before COVID, but certainly through COVID as well. In addition to that, connecting through social media, you know, finding ways to ship samples. We heard earlier some great ideas around, you know, sample boxes that go direct to consumer, or some virtual tastings and things like that, as well as, you know, we talked about KeHE pivoting to a virtual show. You've got to be willing to attend those virtual shows to get in front of consumers. I've heard of suppliers couponing products in the boxes when they ship them, because we know we have the challenge of getting coupons attached to products in the store. So that could be another way, versus in-store demos that we can't have right now. And then continue asking questions. I mean, retailers come up with new ideas. I think we're all coming up with new ways to market products as time goes on. So continue asking those questions for sure.
Again, thank you so much, guys, for all of your expertise. Thank you for spending your time with us. Thank you to the audience for tuning into the session today. I do hope that this was insightful in many ways. Please know that you can always reach out to KeHE. With any questions that you have, we will direct you to the right person. If you have any questions for these panelists specifically, reach out to KeHE, get in touch with us. We can direct you to each of the panelists to get those questions answered. Again, thank you to Chicagoland Food and Beverage Network. We appreciate the opportunity to partner with you, to be part of the session, and thank you for hosting today.